Have you ever wondered how you make sense of the world around you? In this live, I'm going to give you a foundational and mostly misunderstood concept of neuro-linguistic programming that will reveal how you make the meanings you make. Now, why is this important? Because when you understand how you do something, then you can change it. Everything you do, everything you think, and everything you feel and believe is based on meaning. And whether you realize it or not, you are the creator of that meaning. What we're going to cover today is really the start of a much bigger conversation. Actually, I would say the conversation has been going on since the first day that I started doing these lives 6 days ago. And so this is an essential piece of that conversation. And what I don't want you to do is, if you're new to this, don't hurt your brain over this. I didn't quite fully understand it the first time it was explained to me. But it was necessary to start there. Sometimes it's necessary to start in a place where the conversation opens up a lot of possibilities in your mind, and at the same time, because you don't fully understand it, there might be a little discomfort and not knowing everything about it. Just be okay with that discomfort. What I found a lot of in learning and becoming a good learner, which also I think is essential for being a teacher, is it really is a matter of how uncomfortable you're willing to be. Learning a new language, which my wife is Romanian, so I've been learning Romanian. One of the things that I realized in doing that is it's very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable to put yourself in a situation where you don't really speak the language well, and then you also try to participate. There's just so much you don't know, and it's so much easier to just default to my own thoughts and my own language. And as I started that journey, I realized that so much of language learning and how to accelerate it and go fast at it is your ability to tolerate that discomfort of not knowing, not understanding. So in doing that, and when it comes to learning anything, I think that's an essential piece of it. There is discomfort in the not knowing. So it's so easy for us to just go back to what I already know, and that's where I'm comfortable. If you want to learn something new, which I hope all of you are here to do, make sure you relax. And if you don't understand everything, then ask questions. And if you still don't understand everything, trust that you will get it eventually. Because you will, unless you quit. And I hope you're not quitting. I hope you stick with this. Okay, so before we dive in, as usual, please leave in the chat whether or not you're watching this live as I'm broadcasting. And then later, of course, if you have come to this after the live broadcasts, then please put replay. Really appreciate that. Okay. What I'm going to go into today is, like I said, an essential piece of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And it came about by the influence of a man named Gregory Bateson. And Gregory Bateson was a professor at the University of California, Santa Cruz, back in the 70s. And he had a heavy influence on the founders of neuro-linguistic programming, John Grinder and Richard Bandler. And Gregory Bateson created a theory of learning called the logical levels of learning. Now, as soon as I say this, if I have people who have studied NLP, they go, "Oh, no, 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 that was Robert Dilts who created that." And I have to go, "No, no, no. That is not what Robert Dilts created." Robert Dilts created a model called neurological levels. Now, I learned neurological levels because I trained with Robert. My first NLP training was with Robert Dilts and Judith Delozier. And I learned neurological levels, and they were using the terms logical levels and neurological levels interchangeably, which creates a lot of confusion. First of all, neurological levels, it's up for debate whether or not it actually is NLP. A lot of people say it isn't. And one of the reasons why they say it isn't is because it does not follow logical levels, the theory of logical levels by Bateson. And all true NLP models follow the logical levels. And the reason for that is because when we're talking about NLP, what we're looking for is universal structures of your experience that can be used by anyone. That's how we know it's a pure NLP model, that the structure of that model or that model itself can be used by anyone and anyone can benefit from it. If those logical level categories are have what we call content imposed on them, then they're not universal anymore. They're more specific to that person. And if they're more specific to that person, they're not going to be the model is not going to be useful to everyone. And so this is exactly what happened to me. At a certain point, I was practicing neurological levels a lot, and I got to a point where it was no longer useful to me. It didn't help me anymore, and I didn't understand what had happened. And then I had an unfortunate conversation with John Grinder over email about um, how he thought that Robert and Judy weren't doing actual NLP anymore because they were imposing too much content on their models. And then that's when I started to understand the problem with neurological levels. And then eventually, working with my mentor, Steve Andreas, he explained to me why neurological levels was not true NLP because it didn't follow and how it did not follow actual logical levels. So, if when I use the term logical levels, you immediately think of the neurological levels, it's time to break that habit. And that's a problem that I've seen in my training program where people have come from other NLP background and come into the program where we teach the self concept model, which is a true logical levels based model. It is universal that way. And one of the problems that people have is they think neurological levels is actually logical levels because of the confusion. People keep using those terms interchangeably and they have a hard time grasping the self concept model, not because it's difficult, but because they can't get off that idea of what they think logical levels is. All right. So if you're one of those people, disconnect from that. I'm not saying that neurological levels doesn't have any uses to it, but I will tell you it is definitely limited. And it's limited because really what you're getting there is Robert's way of categorizing things in his own life, which, like I said, is not necessarily a bad thing if you find it useful. But we want to go to that universal aspect of logical levels. And that universal way of looking at logical levels is how you categorize things around you. And that categorization is the way in which you make meaning of life around you. Now, I'll give a basic example of what I mean, and then we can then move it into how this affects your values and your values being the generalization about experiences that are important to you. You want, I can assure you, I can say this for sure about each one of you, is that you want to experience more value. Who doesn't, right? You want to experience more value in yourself. You want to experience more value in your life. Why? Because this is what fulfillment is, right? When you experience value, you're experiencing fulfillment. You are fulfilling your values. Logical levels is how you organize that structure. Now, you might think, oh, well, that's how important can that be? Well, it's essential because without that organizing structure, you can't make sense of this. It's like your garage might have all of the tools you need, but if your garage is a mess and you can't find the tools, what good are the tools? So, logical levels works that way. Logical levels helps you organize and understand what's important to you and how you make meaning. It's so important that people actually are using this in sales. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later because when I recognized it, I was like, wow, this person is amazing how he was able to organize this, but he understood logical levels. And teachers can use this in an extraordinary ways. My mentor, Steve Andreas, understood logical levels so well that he organized his trainings according to the logical levels. Why? Well, because that's how we learn. And it was genius the way that he put these trainings together to make them so understandable. I mean, he was taking some of the most complex and sophisticated subjects and can make it so understandable. That was one of his gifts. And I know for a fact that that gift wasn't just something that came out of nowhere. It was from his understanding of logical levels. So real basic logical levels is when you have a set of categories, the higher you go up on these categories, the more general the categories become and the more inclusive they become. When you go down the logical levels, the more exclusive and specific the categories become. So if we start with car, all right, if you say we have, okay, a car, and that's a category. If you think about, you can even think about what just went off in your mind right now. Did you see a car? Did you see an image of a car? Somehow you had to know what I was talking about when I say the word car. You may have seen a prototypical car, meaning it might not be a specific car you've ever seen, but it's a representation of a car. It represents all of the cars you've ever seen and possibly any future car you might ever see. So that's a category. If you crack that category open, you're going to find every car you've ever seen. That's that's what creates this category and your understanding of car. And by the way, this is also how language works, because if I said, "Get in your car and come here to my home," your mind doesn't go to a dictionary inside there and looks up every single word that I just said and defines that word, says, "Okay, get in my car." Get means to move, in means inside something, car is a machine. You're not doing that, right? If you did, you would be way, way behind. You would still be trying to process sentences I said 5 minutes ago. So we don't that's not how we think of language. How we're able to process language so quickly is because there are representations that fire off in our mind very, very quickly with every word. So I say car, you probably see a car. Some of you might not be as visual, you might be more auditory. You could hear a car, you could think of what it feels like to sit in a car or touch a car. That's all possible too. More than likely, you saw a car. So that's one category. Now, if I wanted to go up the logical levels to a higher, more general category, I could say, okay, all vehicles with wheels, right? So now at this higher logical level, I am including cars, but I'm also including a lot more. And remember what I said, as we go up the logical levels, it's more general, it's more inclusive. So we're including something else. We're overlooking the differences of the previous category, and we're including more similarities. We're overlooking the differences between a car and a bike and a wheelbarrow and whatever other vehicle has wheels, and we're putting them all in one category. So we're overlooking the differences and we're paying attention to what's common to all of them. They all have wheels. And then if we want to go to a higher logical level, we could say transportation. So now not only are we also we're including cars, we're including anything with wheels, but we're also including any type of transportation, even if it doesn't have wheels. So now airplanes and boats are now part of this larger category, this larger, more general category where we're focusing on what they all have in common. They're all means of transportation. Okay. So the higher you go up, the more general it becomes and the more inclusive it becomes. Bigger and bigger categories. Now, if we go back to the level of car, and we go down the logical levels, that means we're getting more specific. Okay. So if I went from just a car, which includes anything we would call a car, and I went to green cars, well, now we're excluding all cars except for green ones. So now we're getting more specific. And then if I wanted to go even further down, I could say green Mercedes. All right. So now not only are we excluding any cars that are not green, we're excluding any cars that are not Mercedes as well. So we're getting more specific. All right. So I think you got the idea now. So as you go up the logical levels, more general, focus on what's common, the common element. And as we go down, we're getting more and more specific about it. Everything you think about has a logical level to it, because how you understand it, and a lot of this is unconscious, by the way, how you understand it is where is its place and how you logically categorize it. So, what do I mean by logical? Well, this theory that Gregory Bateson came up with is actually based on a mathematical theory out of abstract math, that anything that is not the actual, it is conceptual, is at a higher logical level. So, for example, the number two is not the same thing as two apples. It's at a higher abstract level that it's a category. It's saying two. So it could be two apples, but it could also be two oranges. It could be two people. It could be two animals. So the category is at a higher logical level because it contains whatever is inside of it and refers to it. So gets back to what I was saying about meaning. So right now I'm teaching, and I'm not really thinking too much about the meaning of what I'm doing here. Like, I know what I'm teaching, I know the meaning of what I'm teaching, but I'm not thinking of like what other meaning this has for me. However, I could imagine stepping outside of myself right now and looking back at myself. We all have this ability. It's called disassociation. And I can look at myself and say, what does this mean to me? And being sort of outside of myself, it is kind of an illusion, but we can, that feels very real to us, and look back and reflect on myself. When I'm in that position, I'm at a higher logical level because I'm stepping back and referring to myself. So this is what I was saying, I think it was 2 days ago when I was covering identity. Your self-esteem is at a higher logical level than your belief about who you are because you're thinking about yourself. You're going to a higher category and thinking, okay, now that I look at all that contains me, what am I? How do I make meaning of this? And how you feel about that is how we get self-esteem. Now back to what I was saying about what's logical. Numbers have that logical progression. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a logical progression to those numbers. No matter which way you go, it's connected by logic. And we do the same thing in the way that we categorize things. How we categorize ourselves, how we categorize other people, how we categorize experiences. There's always a logical connection to each one of them. We have this tendency to think that our thoughts and our ideas just kind of float around aimlessly, chaotically, that even our experiences are just kind of somewhere in our head, just kind of floating around. It's like, no, they're all connected by a sense of logic, a logic that you create, a logic that can actually be changed. And when you change the structure and the order of these things, it can wildly change the way you feel about things, how you feel about yourself, how you feel about other people, how you even create meaning of the reality that you believe you are living in right now. And that's why this topic is so fascinating. And that's why it's also the beginning of a conversation rather than me being able to sit here and explain it all. It's one of those things that you can contemplate infinitely. And so it's not about getting lost in the contemplation of a theory or an idea. In NLP, it's so much more practical than just that. So we want to be able to see how we're doing that in life. How can we observe that? How can we observe what is more important to you? How often do you spend time doing things that seem rather meaningless, and you neglect doing things that you know would advance your life and that would make you happier, but for some reason you don't? Sometimes that's just about how you understand the logical connection to what's important to you. What's more and more and more important? What's more important than that? And what's more important than that? And so that's why yesterday I was talking about values and how important it is to understand your values, but not just how important it is to understand your values. It's also important to understand the hierarchy of what you value in a given context. Now, notice I always say that, in a given context, because you're not going to really find an overall hierarchy of values for your entire life. This is something that Maslow tried to do, Abraham Maslow. and it doesn't work because we're not that rigid. As contexts change, our organization, our hierarchy, our values are going to change. And so we need to be aware of this. So we don't want to be so rigid as we're like, okay, this is the most important thing to me, and then this is second, this is third, and this is fourth, and I have to stick to that. That's gonna limit you. But if you break your life down into 3 to 5 major life contexts, one could be career, one could be a hobby, one could be your marriage, one could be your social life. No more than 5, but no fewer than 3. And you find out what's really important to you in each of these contexts in your life. And not only finding what those values are, but finding the logical order of what is most important to you in those situations. How do you think that will affect your choices and your decisions and your overall fulfillment in that area of your life? Well, I can tell you from experience, and I can tell you from having coached a lot of people, it's profound. It's really profound because the clarity about what you want makes it so much easier to get it, what it is that you want. And when it comes to making choices, so much easier to make choices when you're clear about what is more important to you. There was an NLP guy who was taking this training, and this was years ago. It was an online training, and he says, in a sales situation or a negotiation, either one, the person with the strongest frame will win the negotiation. And I thought about that for a long time. I was like, the strongest frame, and frame was maybe not the best word he could have used. And so the way that I would rephrase that is the person who's most clear about what they want in that situation and knows the logical order of what is most important to them. And the reason why the logical order is important is because when you're in a negotiation, especially if it's going to involve compromise, you need to understand the logical order of what is important to you so that you don't compromise something that makes this not a good deal for you. You have to be willing to know what you can give up in a situation and still be fulfilled. Now, I'll give you an example of how I messed this one up in my life. But it was before I understood logical levels, and it was before I understood values. When I did start to understand this, and I really started to bring in values elicitation into my life and understanding logical levels, I tried something out. I thought to myself, okay, how did I become an insurance agent? And at the time, I was still doing my insurance business. Because once I was finally able to admit it to myself that I didn't like what I was doing and I didn't want to do it anymore, the people who were closest to me said, we we all knew that. What took you so long in admitting this to yourself? And I was like, wow, okay, yeah, I guess I really buried this. I guess I also didn't put on a good show for everyone else, making them believe that I was really into this. So I thought I'm going to do a values elicitation on that choice that I made years ago and see if I can elicit the values behind it. That's an interesting exercise, by the way. We often do values elicitations on what we want now. But if you have a choice if there was a choice you made a long time ago, even, and you still don't understand why you made that choice, you can actually go back and do a values elicitation. And I think it comes out very, very accurate. When I've done it for myself, it has come out very, very accurately, and it's helped me understand decisions that I've made in the past, especially bad ones, which has then helped me understand how to make good ones going forward. So when I went back and asked myself, what made me decide to do this? And I elicited the values behind it. 3 main values came up, and these are the three values that show up in almost all of my areas of my life, but to a differing logical levels. And but they always show up, and that's freedom, joy, and passion. And so I looked at this and I was like, wow, that's really interesting that what I really wanted out of this insurance agency was freedom, joy, and passion because I knew that I was not going to find this joyful. I knew I wasn't going to be passionate about insurance either. I was willing to sell out the other two values for freedom, thinking that if running my own business, more specifically this insurance agency, gave me freedom, then with that freedom, I could then go and pursue what makes me joyful and what I'm passionate about. That was my logical thinking at the time. Man, was I wrong about that. Because what happened was when I started running my insurance agency, and for 2 years, I worked insane hours. Didn't get to see my kids nearly as much as I wanted to, and my kids were a big part of me making that decision to go into business for myself because I wanted to be free to be with them and not just be like a constantly working father. I wanted to spend more time with them. So, I didn't have much freedom. I had less freedom than I had whenever I was just working a job. And again, I wasn't passionate about insurance. I knew that. I didn't find it joyful. So I wasn't getting any of my values fulfilled. Gee, I wonder why I didn't succeed, right? I mean, it's so obvious to me now. It wasn't obvious to me then. It's really hard to be fulfilled off of just one value as well. So after understanding that, I told myself, okay, I'm never going to do a career where I can't get all three of these values fulfilled. And whatever other values there are, and there were more than just three values. I know that if I can get freedom, joy, and passion fulfilled in my career, I will be fine. As long as I can get those three, I can compromise on any of the other values. And that has been true ever since I understood that. So that's why it's important to understand logical levels. Understanding your values right away, being able to access them, bringing them from your unconsciousness into your consciousness is a huge first step. That clarity is unbelievable when you have that. Going even further and knowing the hierarchy of these values for you, meaning understanding their logical levels, just takes it to the next level of clarity. So whether you're in a negotiation, whether you're teaching or you're selling, understanding logical levels is understanding how people make meaning of the world around them. So if I'm selling you something and I understand what you value because I've elicited that from you, as long as my product or service aligns with your values, I'm gonna be able to sell this to you because the value you're looking for is in the service I provide or the product I provide. So it's a no-brainer. Now, sometimes that's not the case, and so I don't recommend as a salesperson that you try to sell something that doesn't fit with someone's values because they're gonna have buyer's remorse. They're not gonna be happy about that. When you're teaching when you teach according to logical levels, you're showing people how everything connects from one category to the next, and you can go in different directions. You can start with a broad category, and I do this sometimes when I'm teaching, even here when I'm doing the lives. I start with a broad category or a broad concept, and then gradually I get more and more specific. Sometimes it works better the other way. Start with something very specific and then show people how it connects to something bigger and bigger categories, bigger and bigger contexts, bigger and bigger meanings and levels. And so you find as a teacher which one works best for what it is you're teaching. And there was a salesperson, or rather, he was a person who had a product to teach people how to sell something. And right away, when I saw what he was doing, I was like, okay, I've never seen anyone bring together NLP and sales so well. And he was using logical levels to do it. And after his presentation, I walked up to him and I said that to him, and he was like, "Oh, okay, you realize what I was doing?" And I was like, "Yeah," and that was amazing because it was so clear and so clean how he was creating a logical progression out of everything that he was presenting, so that by the end of the presentation, you just felt compelled to buy what he was selling, and what he was selling was how to do how what he let's see how I can say this. What he was selling was how to do what he was doing in that presentation. And I was like, I got to know more. It was quite amazing. So the range of what you can use this for is unlimited. And eventually, what this theory of logical levels, as Steve Andreas was studying it, it helped him create what his theory of NLP, but not just NLP, but his theory of how we create our reality, which is called scope and category. And this theory is amazing. I feel like I'm very much a student of it still. And the idea is scope is everything that is contained in whatever internal representations you have. So your thoughts, your feelings, how are those represented internally? That's what scope is. How you categorize that information is where we go to the category. So scope and category. And so whether we're talking about who you believe yourself to be, and that's a meaning, what meaning do you make of yourself? What world you believe you live in, what reality you believe you live in. These are all categories based on scopes, representations. Now, we're most often aware, conscious of the categories, the meanings we make, and we're most often unaware and unconscious of the scopes that are creating that are whatever that representation is that is causing us to categorize and evaluate things this way. So what do we try to do? Well, we make this big mistake of trying to change the category directly. So your self-esteem is a category. How you feel about yourself and yourself being however you represent yourself, that's the scope. We try to change the category. Well, I want to feel better about myself. So I'm just going to like make myself feel better about myself. And we try, lots of little exercises, whatever, to do that. And it doesn't work, or it works temporarily and it wears off very quickly. Why? Because unless you change the scope, the category will not change. So, for example, I look at a painting, the all the colors that are involved, the canvas, even how big the painting is or how small it is, all of these things would be the scope. And I look at the painting and I say, that's an ugly painting. That's how I categorize that painting. So the scope is the painting itself and all of its attributes. The category I give it is it's ugly. Now, what if I tried to change the category without changing the scope? That would be kind of strange. If to me it's an ugly painting, it's always going to be an ugly painting as long as it looks like whatever it looks like. How would I need to change my category of it being ugly? We'd have to change the painting, change the structure of it or the colors of it or something about it we would have to change. This works exactly the same way when it comes to all of your beliefs, all of the meanings you make about who you are. If you feel like you are of low value or you lack confidence or any of those things, the tendency will be for you to go and try to change it at that logical level, and it won't work. But what you can do is you can change your internal representations. And you don't even have to change the content. You only need to change the structure. The structure tells the mind how to perceive or categorize or make meaning of whatever it is that you're paying attention to, whatever it is that you're evaluating, whatever scope you're evaluating. Now, I told you it was going to get deep. And so if you were unable to follow what I was just saying, it's okay. Not only is this already recorded and it will be there for you to come back to and listen to, again, like I said, it's not going to help you to hurt your brain over this. So relax, just take those understandings in. and that's fine. Take from it whatever you need right now. And if you don't fully understand it, that's okay. It's okay. Like, don't put any pressure on yourself. It's not going to help you to understand it any better. This is a process. It took me years to understand these things. It all starts, though, with someone explaining it as clear as they possibly can, and you just being open to it. All right. So before I get to the conclusion, let me know what your biggest takeaway of this lecture has been, because I'm sure, uh, well, I'm not so sure. I'm curious what people are taking away from this, because it is a very big subject. Like I said, it's the beginning of a conversation, certainly not the end of it. And so let me know what your big takeaway is as I conclude. So, like I said, this is just the beginning of what you can understand about logical levels and how that can help you understand your life and what's important to you, and getting clear about it and making that happen. Because the more clear you are, the easier it becomes to get what you want. So, like I said, logical levels can be used in teaching to help students learn faster. It can be used in sales so that the only logical thing a prospect can do is buy your service or product. Once you tap in, once you tap into how people create meaning, there's nothing you can't do, because you go from being unaware that you are the creator of meaning in your life to becoming a conscious creator of your life and who you are. Because it really comes down to the meaning you create, and you are that creator. So when you understand structurally how this works, it just becomes a matter of changing that structure, and it makes things a lot more predictable, which is amazing. Okay, let's see here. Change our lives, elevate our lives, and transform our lives. Yep, you got the right idea. Let's see if there's any questions. Make meaning of life around you. Absolutely. Yes. Are you on YouTube? Yes, I am. That's mainly where I do all my stuff. Everything else is kind of secondary to YouTube. Live now, will be watching later because I missed a bunch. Okay, no worries there. I saw someone on a YouTube video who said that if you say the word apple, your subconscious doesn't know what the heck you're talking about. I don't believe that. Your unconscious is the one that's, yeah, I mean, that's where it's referenced. You'd have, maybe there's more context to that. And so if you were able to give me more of the context of what the person was saying, maybe there's something there. But just based off of that one sentence, no, your unconscious knows what an apple is. My inner chimp lives to procrastinate. Okay. How do I find out what is keeping me from doing the things I know would advance my life, and of course, what to do about it? If you haven't seen the live that I did on resistance, I highly recommend you watch that one, because that's where I cover exactly what you're talking about. Associations is like associating certain tasks as being boring, and boring is bad or unwanted experience. You probably were mentioning that when I talked about association and disassociation, and that's not what I mean by it. So association or disassociation is like, if I were to imagine stepping outside of myself and like I was watching myself, which is kind of self-conscious, that would be disassociation. But if I'm here in my body and like focused here, then I'm associated. And you can think of the same as like with memories. When you think about a memory, do you sort of step into it like you're there all over again? Or do you see yourself like you're watching a movie of yourself doing that? So if you step into it and it's like you're actually there, that's what we call associated. If you're watching yourself, that's what we call disassociated. So disassociated is like when you look into a mirror, it's like you're seeing yourself. But what you're talking about is like the category. So if certain tasks I say are boring, then I'm categorizing that way. That's the meaning I make of those tasks. And so I put those tasks in a category, and based on my evaluation of those tasks, I say this is boring. So that's that scope and category. Scope being the task, my evaluation of it being boring is the category. There's a live from a few days ago, The Secret to Overcoming Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I watched that and did it, and things got a bit weird. I was looking for a different way. Well, tell me how they got weird. To me, that's the quickest and most direct way. I love using abstract mystical reality tunnels and use NLP to make them more concrete and practical. Good. Sounds a bit like trying to change a belief without changing perceptions. Well, you got to think about what is a belief based on. It's based on information. Okay. If you're still looking at the same information but expecting the belief to change, it's not going to happen. That just doesn't work that way. So you have to change the structure of that information. Because, for example, if the belief is based on facts, which I hope your beliefs are, you might say, well, how can I change a belief because these things actually did happen? These are the facts. But if you rearrange how you structure those facts in a different structure, then you might evaluate it differently. And this is what an example of that would be reframing. During his 35-minute-ish presentations, I lose concentration at least 3 times and my mind goes wandering around. I have to bring myself back. Well, well, they're recorded, so you can always come back. Damon, I wonder if you still remember the name of the person that gave you the sales training that you mentioned. Yeah, Jason Fladlian. I did an interview with him on my channel a few years ago. I have never seen anyone bring together NLP and pretty much everything I've ever learned about sales together. He even wrote a book called One to Many, which is about doing sales one to many in the form of presentations. He's extremely talented. Actually, well, no, not gonna go into that. Could go down another tunnel on that one. Takeaway: examining logical levels and how they impact our habits and social interactions. Nice. Thinking exactly the same. Okay, understanding logical levels is central to cause transformation. Um, yes, I wouldn't say you. So I would think of logical levels. So transformation, as we use it in the self-concept model, that's based on a logical levels model, and there are people who are able to make that work and make transformations work without having a very profound understanding of logical levels. So I wouldn't go quite that far. What I am saying is understanding logical levels, how you take that understanding into your everyday life is extremely profound. And so this is kind of giving you a taste of it. It's an introduction to it. And you can go really, really deep with it. And how deep you want to go is up to you. It's interesting. I think it might help with where I am now. Okay, good. Take away assessments and evaluations or categories, attributes and objects or scopes. Yeah, I would go with that. Logical levels and how they impact our habits and social interactions. Okay. Very complex, but great ideas. Think about. I'll rewatch a few times. Okay. Comparing the painting to your life and knowing that you can change the colors is very powerful. Yeah. Yes. Good. I'm glad you got the analogy. That's great. I have to listen to this once again. Okay. The logical levels are very logical, but I missed how they actually apply to my mind and life. So we'll have to watch again. Okay. Yeah. I'm not going to go through that again. Thanks for clarifying associations. That makes sense now. Okay. Good. Wow. All right. This was so much fun. I, as always, love sharing this, and I'm so happy to be sharing this with all of you that you show up. And I'm starting to see a lot of the same people showing up time after time. This is day 6, which means we have 24 more lives to go. I am really inspired by your commitment, by you keep showing up. Love it. All right. Well, I'll see you guys again tomorrow. Make sure you check the time. We do this on different times. Why do we have setbacks after changing to a better quality? Um, I'd have to know more about what you mean. But for now, I have to go. But feel free to ask questions in the comments. Thank you and appreciate it. Oh, you're very welcome. All right. Thank you for all the kind words. That's awesome. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody.